now move to question time, and I'll call Senator Scarr.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Farrell. The two budgets of the Albanese Labor government have committed an additional $188 billion in spending, with economists describing your last budget as unambiguously expansionary and likely to add to inflation. Doesn't all the evidence show that Labor's fiscal policy is keeping inflation higher for longer and fuelling the cost of living crisis?
Thank you, Senator Scarr. Senator Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank Senator Scarr for his question. Well, I obviously wasn't watching too closely on the on budget night, but of course this government produced a surplus, a $20 billion surplus. So we've tried to make this a fairer country. We've tried to make it by improving wages, by trying to bring some equality that we sort of lost over the previous 9 years.
Senator Cash.
But of course, by delivering a surplus, of course, we put downward pressure on inflation. And yes, we did rejig spending in this country. We rejigged spending. We rejigged spending based on the commitments, based on the commitments that we made to the Australian people when they rejected.
Senator Farrell, please resume your seat. Order across the chamber, particularly on my left. Senator Farrell, please continue.
We rejigged and we reset. We reset the priorities of this country to make sure that we were looking after the people that really need Senator looking Cash. After, not like your budgets, which just looked after your rich mates. We rejigged the budget to make sure that ordinary Australians were being looked after, and at the same time and simultaneously produced the first budget surplus in 15 years. Now, it's something you kept promising to do, but you never, ever did. The time for
answering has expired. Senator Scarr, beg your pardon, first supplementary.
It hardly inspires confidence, does it? Before the election, the Prime Minister claimed that Australians would have cheaper mortgages under Labor. With inflation continuing to rise under Labor, an average family with a $750,000 mortgage is already paying $22,000 more each year. $22,000 more each year. Is this what the Prime Minister meant by cheaper mortgages?
Thank you, Senator Scarr. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank Senator Scarr for his first supplementary question. Look, we do understand the hurt that ordinary Australians are feeling as a result of those increases in mortgage rates. Of course, first point I'd make is those increases started under your government and were a product of decisions. Well, okay, Senator Scarr. No, the surplus didn't start under your government. The surplus started under this government, and the fact that you keep
Birmingham.
or do you want to? Who's asking the questions? Is it Scarr or is it Birmingham? President. Well, that isn't true. I'm answering directly the question that Senator.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Order on my left. The constant interjections are disorderly. Senator Scarr, second supplementary.
The Prime Minister said in January before his disastrous referendum campaign, "My New Year's resolution is just to continue to deal with cost of living pressures." With Australians facing high mortgage payments as they head to Christmas and having to juggle higher grocery prices, higher energy bills, Why has the Treasurer and the Prime Minister still not released a comprehensive plan to get inflation under control and put downward rather than upward pressure on interest rates?
Thank you, Senator Scarr. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank Senator Scarr for his second supplementary question. Well, just on the referendum, the Prime Minister went to the last election saying he would hold a referendum on an Indigenous voice for the Australian Constitution, and he did exactly what he said he was going to do. He put the referendum.
Senator Farrell, please resume your seat. Senator Birmingham, I have just sat the minister down because of the interjections, particularly on my left. Thank you, Minister. Please continue.
Prime Minister of this country stuck to his guns. He said he was going to do it, and that's what he did. And regrettably, the Australian people said no, and we accept the decision. But since that time, of course, we have been putting downward pressure on inflation. And what did the coalition, your party, what did the coalition do? They voted against lowered energy prices. They voted against cheaper childcare.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Stewart.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister for Trade and Tourism, Senator Farrell. Stabilising our relationship with China is vitally important for Australia and important for Australian exporting businesses and workers. After all, China is our largest trading partner. Yesterday, the Prime Minister met with Chinese President Xi in Beijing to continue stabilising our relationship and continue advocating for removal of the outstanding trade impediments affecting high-quality Australian products. How are the government's efforts to stabilise our trade relationship with China delivering practical outcomes for Australian exporters, producers and workers?
Great question. Thank you, Senator Stewart. Minister Farrell.
Your great work.
No, my mum used to say self-praise was no recommendation. Thank you, President, and thanks Senator Stewart for her question. And I know just how important trade is to the great state of Victoria. And yesterday we witnessed a historic moment in our bilateral relationship with China, when the Prime Minister Albanese met with President Xi. This visit to China marked the 50th anniversary of Gough Whitlam's first visit to China. Positive, constructive dialogue is a win-win for both our economies that deliver practical benefits for Australian exporters, businesses and workers. By having a more stable relationship with China, we've seen the return of so many wonderful Australian products back into a market of 1.4 billion consumers. Since coming to government, we faced an incredible $20 billion worth of trade impediments on Australian exporters. But in the last 18 months, we have made enormous progress. Between January and August of this year, Australia exported $6 billion worth of products to China that were previously subject to trade impediments. That is $6 billion worth of high-quality Australian product that has now re-entered Chinese markets due to the stabilisation efforts of our government. Yes, and Murray was helping too. Don't you worry, it's a team effort. Team Australia. We know that the barley farmers, the miners, the forestry workers, the hay producers, even the fruit pickers in South Australia of this country are benefiting from stabilising our trading relationship with China. We are advocating for removal of all remaining trade impediments so our wine growers and our meat producers
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Stewart's first supplementary.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Minister, for that comprehensive answer. How is the government helping Australian exporters diversify their trade to ensure we remain economically resilient in the years ahead?
Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank Senator Stewart for her first supplementary question. Our government knows that, on the one hand, we need to stabilise our trading relationship with China, but on the other hand, we actively support Australian exporters diversifying their trade and supply chains. Because of the last few years, we've seen perils of having all of your eggs in the one basket. That is why next week the Prime Minister and I will travel to the United States for another one. We're continuing to deliver, Senator McKenzie, including meetings of the annual APEC meetings, as well as representing Australia in negotiations on the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework. These important trade meetings will help diversify our supply chains, with many of the trading partners making us more economically resilient to future shocks of the global economy.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Stewart, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. We all know how much we love creating jobs on this side of the parliament. So, Minister, how does more trade help create Australian jobs and help reduce the cost of living for everyday Australians?
Thank you, Senator Stewart. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank Senator Stewart for her second supplementary question. Of course, we've had a record first-term government growth in jobs, almost the equivalent of 6 MCG stadiums. Australia is economically stronger when global trade flows freely. We know that 1 in 4 Australian jobs relate to trade, and jobs in export industries pay 5% higher wages on average. In addition, we know that trade creates a competitive environment, lowering prices and helping reduce the cost of living for everyday Australians, which is why we've worked so hard in the last year to deliver opportunities that advance our trade agenda by implementing trade agreements with India and the United Kingdom, something that the previous government, of course, couldn't do. This government is ensuring that trade—
The time for answering has expired. Senator Davey.
You negotiated again?
Oh, nice.
How many?
Order on my right. Senator Davey.
Cocky's Corner.
Yes, Cocky's Corner. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Environment and Water, Senator Watt. Minister, in his second reading speech to the House on the Water Amendment Water for the Environment Special Account Bill 2012, then Water Minister Burke stated, and I quote, "Importantly, the plan being proposed by the MDBA stipulates that additional water only be acquired through methods that deliver additional water for the environment without negative social and economic consequences such as infrastructure." Minister, why is this government refusing to release the details of the social and economic impact to communities if the proposed Murray-Darling water recovery strategy is implemented, and which communities will be targeted, what impact it will have on the cost of living at the supermarket for constituents?
Thank you, Senator Davey. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President, and thank you for getting to the question, Senator Davey. In broad terms, the reason this government, the Albanese government, is taking serious action about the Murray-Darling Basin, if you want to know why we're doing that, I just suggest to the National Party, have a look in the mirror. Have a look in the mirror about the decade of inaction that the Liberal and National parties took of inaction over 10 years in implementing the Murray-Darling Basin Plan.
Order.
And I know you've got a lot to say in opposition, but you didn't have a lot to say in government, did you? You never had much to say about the fact the Murray-Darling Basin—
Watt, please resume your seat. Senator Davey.
Point of order, direct relevance. I wasn't asking about what we did in government. I was asking about why they're not releasing details on social and economic impacts.
That's right.
Thank you, Senator Davey. I will draw order on my right. Order. I will draw the minister to the last part of your question, but I also remind senators there was significant preamble in that question, which the minister is also entitled to address, as is the minister also entitled to address interjections. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President. And as I say, if the Nationals want to understand why this government has to do something to rescue the Murray-Darling Basin, they only need to look back at their track record over the 10 years that they are in power. Because the Murray-Darling Basin Plan that the former government allegedly was committed to required the recovery of 450 gigalitres of water for the environment. And guess how much was recovered in 10 years of coalition government? No, Senator McAllister, to be fair, it was more than one. It was one more than one. It was 2 gigalitres out of 450 gigalitres that was required under the plan that was delivered in 10 years of National Party-led coalition government.
Watt, please resume your seat. Order on my left, and Minister Watt, I will direct you to the last part of the question. Thank you.
So we're serious about delivering the Murray-Darling Basin Plan, and we're serious about doing it in a way that minimises the socio-economic impact on basin communities. Now, the Nationals like to portray themselves as the friends of agriculture, while allowing the death of the most important food bowl in Australia. And you're right, Senator Farrell, what do they do about barley? What do they do about lobster? What do they do about all sorts of trade that went under
Minister,
with China?
Please resume your seat. Senator Davey.
Point of order again. Direct relevance. He's now going on to lobster and barley trade with China. I'm asking about social and economic impacts in the basin.
Thank you, Senator Davey, and you will note. Order. Senator McKenzie, you've had way too much to say at question time. I invite you to put your name on the list tonight if you have so much to say. Senator Davey, I have drawn the minister to your question, and I will remind him once again, Minister.
As I say, we have made clear that we will minimise the socio-economic impact of implementing the plan, but what we will not do is allow the Murray-Darling Basin to collapse and undermine agriculture in this country.
The time for answering has expired. Senator Davey, first supplementary.
Thank you, Minister, for that non-answer. The former Water Minister, Tony Burke, also in February 2012 said, and I quote, "We don't do the environment or anyone a favour if we acquire volumes of water and have the impact that may have on communities and then discover it can't actually be used." End quote. Right. Why is the government refusing to release details around which constraints program it believes are needed to ensure environmental outcomes can be achieved?
Thank you, Senator Davey. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Senator Davey. Well, Minister Burke was a very fine agriculture minister. He was also a very fine environment and water minister who oversaw the delivery of the first Murray-Darling Basin Plan, a plan that is absolutely essential to deliver if we are to save agriculture in the eastern coast of our country. There are thousands of jobs and thousands and hundreds of communities that are depending upon the delivery of the Murray-Darling Basin, and they were profoundly let down by 10 years of Liberal and National Party government, which delivered 2 gigalitres out of the 450 required for environmental recovery. Now, what we have said is that in delivering our plan, we will provide more time for it to be delivered. We will provide more options to deliver the remaining water, including water efficiency infrastructure projects.
Please resume your seat. Senator Davey.
I'm sorry, he's got 13 seconds left. Direct relevance. I'm asking why they're refusing to release details around constraints projects. He hasn't mentioned constraints once.
Senator Davey, I also remind you, you referred back to comments made by the former Minister Burke. It's not your prerogative to argue back at me. You referred back to 2012. The minister is entitled to answer that aspect of your question. Minister.
Thanks, President. Well, they don't like hearing about the fact that they let down Murray-Darling communities over 10 years. They don't like hearing about the fact that they undermined the future of Australian agriculture and the future of our most important food bowl. We are not going to let that happen, and we are going to save
thank you,
the Murray-Darling.
Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Davies, second supplementary.
Try again to get an answer. Basin Communities Committee Indigenous member Mr Philo McHughes recently stated, and I quote, "I'm very concerned that buybacks will further spiral our peoples in these communities into poverty." End quote. When will the government listen to basin communities and voices like Mr McHughes and look at alternatives being proposed like billabong restoration and complementary measures?
Thank you, Senator Davey. Minister Watt.
Thank you, Senator Davey. Well, Senator Davey has just exemplified the National Party's approach to this entire issue, which is to misrepresent the government's position in inquiries in the media and to basin communities. We have made very clear over and over again that we do think that voluntary water buybacks are going to be necessary to save the Murray-Darling Basin, and they weren't required. They weren't required and weren't delivered under the former government.
Resume your seat. Senator Davey.
Point of relevance, I did not mention I did not mention voluntary buybacks. I mentioned complementary measures and other projects.
Senator Davey, order on my right. Senator Davey, you did mention buybacks. The minister is being relevant, and Minister, please continue.
Thank you, President. Well, if Senator Davey allowed me to answer the question, what I was saying was that we have said that it is going to be necessary to undertake voluntary water buybacks to deliver the plan, but we have also repeatedly said that it is not the only option that we are considering. We are considering water efficiency infrastructure projects, but Senator Davey and people like her go around river communities, basin communities, misrepresenting the government's policy and pretending it's only about buybacks. We've also said that all buybacks will be voluntary. We've also said that they will be done across the basin in order to minimise the impact on any one particular community. And we've also said that where they do have a negative impact on communities, there will be structural adjustment assistance provided. It would be good if the National Party were honest for a change.
Has expired. Senator Shoebridge.
Thanks, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Defence. Over recent years, Australians have been watching in increasing horror as reports of war crimes and human rights abuses take place from Yemen to Ukraine, from Gaza to West Papua. Can you tell the Australian public exactly what Australian weapons have been sold and to which countries under your government?
Minister Watt.
Thank you, Senator Shoebridge. Well, in answer to your— thanks, Senator Farrell, that was one I was looking for. It's a very two-way helping relationship we have here. We are a team. We are a team, again, something that's a foreign concept for those opposite. The party of individualism even extends to the Senate chamber, where they won't help out their mates. In fact, they'd rather stab a knife in the back of their mates. But I digress. I digress. Senator Shoebridge, you are aware that I am not able to confirm the details of particular arms exports to any country in the world, and you are aware of that because I know that this was covered in some detail at Senate estimates when you were asking questions about this very matter. So you do know that we can't do that. What you do know also is that Australia's defence exports are conducted in line with robust export guidelines and international obligations, and the Department of Defence assesses each export application on its own merits against the relevant legislative criteria under the Defence Trade Controls Act 2012. This legislation addresses a range of issues, including those that you've raised, including foreign policy, human rights, national security and Australia's international obligations. And if Defence identifies an export would be contrary to Australia's national interest or pose risks to Australia's security, defence or international relations, the permit is refused. So, under this government, Australia's export controls regime provides a balance between protecting our defence and security interests, meeting our international obligations, including around human rights and arms trading, and also supporting Australia's sovereign industrial capability. But I will be clear about this. The government appreciates this is a complex and sensitive area of public policy that must account for security interests, human rights obligations and the viability of domestic industry.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Shoebridge, first supplementary.
Thanks, President. We know that this year alone, your government authorised 52 defence export permits to Israel. As the Israeli government engages in war crimes in Gaza, can you provide the Australian public with information on what military equipment these permits contain and if there are any currently before the government awaiting approval?
Thank you, Senator Shoebridge. Minister Watt.
Well, again, Senator Shoebridge, I refer you to my first answer and I refer you to the many answers you were provided at Senate estimates, where we're not going to provide detail about individual arrangements with individual countries. But as was also pointed out to you, Senator Shoebridge, at Senate estimates, when we're talking about defence exports, we're not just talking about weapons, we're not just talking about arms, we're also talking about what are known as dual-use technology, things like radios, or other sort of equipment, technology and communications equipment. So you shouldn't assume, Senator Shoebridge, through the President, that the existence of a permit means that a weapon has been exported to any country, whether that be Israel or any other. But for very good reason, we don't go around broadcasting details of export permits that we have with any particular country, because there are national security issues at stake, and this is a government that takes national security seriously.
Senator Shoebridge, second supplementary.
Distressingly, once Australia authorises weapons to leave our shores, we are not obliged in any way to follow up on how they are used. Will the Albanese government take responsibility and introduce policy that requires the Australian government to monitor the military equipment exported from Australia to ensure that it is not used to commit war crimes?
Thank you, Senator Shoebridge. Minister Watt.
Thank you, Senator Shoebridge. Again, you wouldn't expect me, especially as a representing minister, to be making Australian government policy in Senate question time. But the broad position that we take, as I say, we're not broadcasting individual details.
Order.
But as I have already answered, the matters around human rights and the usage of defence exports, whether they be weapons or other forms of technology, those issues are taken into account in the granting of a particular permit or the extension of permits in the future. So these are exactly the types of issues that are taken into account by the Department of Defence in reaching decisions about whether they would grant a particular export
Minister,
permit.
please resume your seat. Senator Shoebridge.
My point of order is to relevance. My question wasn't as to consideration done at the time of the permit, but once the weapons have been sold, and the minister is refusing to address that point.
The minister is being relevant. Thank you, Senator Shoebridge. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President. Well, as I say, Senator Shoebridge, these matters are taken into account. The record of particular buyers of defence exports are taken into account in determining the success or otherwise of a particular export application. I can't really add anything further to what you heard at Senate estimates.
Thank you. Senator Grogan.
Thank you, President. My question is also to the Minister representing the Minister for Climate Change and Energy, Senator Watt. Given the opposition are opposed to building the renewable energy that our country needs, and the Leader of the Nationals is calling for a pause in the rollout of renewables, can the Minister please explain to the Senate how recent data and analysis shows that renewable energy is cleaner, cheaper and reducing energy prices?
Thank you, Senator Grogan. Minister Watt.
Thank you, Senator Grogan. Well, you've already gone the trigger word for half the opposition. Climate change, renewables, woo, they lose it. They lose it every time. So, Senator Grogan, I thank you for your question. I can confirm that new analysis shows Australian households are saving from 39 to 57% on their energy bills when they have rooftop solar installed. Imagine that,
Minister
installing
Watt.
solar panels
Minister
and saving
Watt.
your energy bills.
Please resume your seat. Order. Order. Senator McKenzie, order. Minister, please continue.
President, it seems that the opposition hates the idea of Australians saving money on their energy bills. But by installing those solar panels, rooftop solar, Australians are generating savings of between $822 and $1,350 per household on power bills, and that makes a significant difference to the hip pockets of Australian families. And that's because, as this side of the chamber knows, and we have many examples right now before us of what that chamber doesn't know, that side, renewable energy is the cheapest form of energy. 1 in 3 Australian homes now have a solar installation, and the total small-scale solar capacity of Australia's 3.5 million household installations exceeds 21 gigawatts. That's the equivalent of 10 to 15 large coal-fired power stations. And I'm proud to say, Senator Rennick, that some of the biggest benefits are in Queensland. In south-east Queensland, households with solar save 44% on their bills. And in regional Queensland, Senator Canavan, households are saving 57% on their bills. The Australian Energy Market Operator's latest report shows the 31% growth in rooftop solar output helped drive a 71% reduction in wholesale prices in a year by reducing demand on the grid and reducing the use of more expensive sources of fuel during the day. And that's why the Albanese government is ensuring wider access to cleaner, cheaper solar. Senator Grogan is right. The Nationals leader, Mr Littleproud, did call for a pause on renewables. At a time when Australians are dealing with cost of living pressures, the Nationals want to pause the price reductions Aussies are getting through renewables.
Thank you,
We're getting on with the job of rolling out renewables.
Has expired. Senator Grogan, first supplementary.
There's some impressive statistics, Senator Watt. Solar energy is really making a significant difference for so many people in this country. So this month, Australians will receive further instalments on their energy rebates, part of the responsible cost of living support being rolled out by the Albanese government. Could you outline for us how many Australians are going to benefit from these rebates?
Thank you, Senator Grogan. Minister Watt. Senator Rennick.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator Rennick, for confirming that the opposition's policy is to continue to oppose energy rebates. Thank you for confirming that, Senator Rennick. Unlike the opposition, the Albanese government's #1 priority is addressing inflation and cost of living pressures, and that's why we are delivering targeted relief without adding to inflation. We're delivering energy price relief rebates to more than 5 million households and 1 million small businesses to provide hundreds of dollars off bills. These will benefit eligible households by up to $500 and small businesses by up to $650 in total per year and are credited to power bills throughout the year. For households receiving rebates, bill increases in most jurisdictions have been completely offset and have decreased by up to 18% for the most vulnerable Australians. Of course, not everyone in this chamber voted for that energy bill relief. When we voted for cheaper energy, Peter Dutton and the Coalition said no. When we voted for cleaner energy, Peter Dutton and the Coalition said no. But when it comes to cost of living relief, Labor says yes.
The time for answering has expired, and I remind you when using the names of people in the other chamber to use their correct titles. Senator Grogan, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. And thank you, Senator Watt, for outlining that over the awful din from the other side of the chamber. I note that at the end of last year, the Liberals and Nationals teamed up and voted against energy price relief for Australians, and that Peter Dutton has said that, just like Reagan, he will wind back government intervention. Given this, can the minister please inform the Senate how the coal and gas price caps are providing much-needed relief to Australians' homes and businesses?
The time for answering the question has expired. I also remind you to refer to others in the other chamber by their correct titles. Minister.
Thank you, President. A recent report by the Australian Energy Regulator showed that wholesale electricity prices for the last quarter were less than half those in the same period last year. And this highlights the significant impact of the Albanese government's coal and gas price caps that they are having on Australian power bills. Now, we know that the job is not yet done when it comes to assisting with cost of living relief, but we've introduced a range of measures like this to add weight to and assist Australians. But these caps that we introduced and we voted for, guess how the Coalition voted? They voted no. When we voted to cap coal and gas prices, the Coalition said no. And of course, before he went off on his most recent world tour, Mr Dutton, they don't like being reminded, but we're going to keep reminding people, Mr Dutton told an energy conference, just like Reagan, we will wind back government intervention. What sort of intervention is Mr Dutton going to wind back? Is it coal and gas prices or is it energy rebates?
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator David Pocock.
Thank you, President. My question is to the Minister representing...
Order across the chamber. Please continue, Senator Pocock.
Thanks, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Minister Farrell. Last week, the Treasurer delivered a keynote speech where he acknowledged that, to quote, without more decisive action across all levels of government, working with investors, industry and communities, the energy transition could fall short of what the country needs. And yet the government still hasn't announced a comprehensive or credible response to the US Inflation Reduction Act. What is the reason for the delay, and does the government accept that we are losing the race for capital?
Thank you, Senator Pocock. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank Senator Pocock for his question. And look, the short answer to your question, Senator Pocock, is no. And I think there is a degree of misunderstanding about how the United States Inflation Reduction Act actually works. If you have a look at the legislation, of course, that well, I'm happy to tell you, Senator Scarr, and you might learn something today. Well, we'll see. We'll see. The American legislation, the Inflation Reduction Act, provides that starting at 40% and then moving to 80%, all of the critical minerals that are going to go into the batteries of electric cars in the United States have to come from countries that have two criteria. Number one, they have the resources themselves, and of course, once again, Australia is the lucky country because we have either the largest or the second largest of all of the critical minerals that are going to go into the batteries of the future. Secondly, we have to have a free trade agreement with the United States. Australia is one of very few countries that have both of those criteria. What that means, Senator Pocock, is a huge amount of investment, particularly from the United States, but not just from there, from Japan, Korea, Singapore, if we get lucky, maybe even the Europeans. So you can talk down the Inflation Reduction Act, but in addition to that, of course, what has California done? Well, California has mandated that by 20... Well, California has mandated that by 2020...
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Pocock, first supplementary. Senator Pocock, I have called you.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Minister. Yes, critical minerals is one part of the Inflation Reduction Act. I note that the government's contribution is less than Microsoft's investment, which the Prime Minister also seemed to help announce. I'm interested why the government isn't implementing a production tax credit, as we've seen in the US. Payment for outcomes. You produce solar panels here in Australia, we will give you a tax credit. What's the government doing on this?
Thank you, Senator Pocock. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank Senator Pocock for his first supplementary question. Look, we are developing a response to the Inflation Reduction Act. I've tried to put into perspective the positive aspects of that piece of legislation. I didn't go into the negative aspects of that legislation, and they relate to other forms of energy, such as hydrogen. And one of the discussions that we're having with the United States at the moment is ensuring that the price that they sell their hydrogen at doesn't undercut any production of hydrogen. Of course, all of the states right now are looking at the way in which they can get into that hydrogen cycle, and I know from South Australia's point of view just how much work and effort is going into the development at Port Bonython.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Pocock, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Minister. Why is the Albanese government happy to use Australian companies for renewable energy photo ops, but not back this up with tangible support in response to the Inflation Reduction Act to keep those companies here in Australia producing Australian-made products at a time where we hear so much about national security and sovereign capability?
Thank you, Senator Pocock. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank Senator Pocock for his second supplementary question. Well, I simply don't accept the premise of that question, Senator Pocock. I think this government is moving in exactly the right direction to maximise the benefit for this country, both in terms of investment and in terms of jobs, in respect of all of those critical minerals and the new energy sources. This government, Senator Pocock, intends to build Australia as a renewable superpower, and all of the things that we're doing, whether it's in respect of the National Reconstruction Fund, whether it's trying to encourage investment from overseas, in our resources, because we've always required that sort of investment.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Just for the benefit of the chamber, Senator Van had the next question, but he has given that to Senator Babet. So, Senator Babet.
Thank you, President. My question is for the Minister who represents the Finance Minister, Minister Farrell. Minister, a recent statement by the IMF, the International Monetary Fund, stated that the Australian government should implement public investment projects at a more measured and coordinated pace, so, for example, infrastructure, to alleviate inflationary pressures. Now, I'm not usually one to support bodies like the IMF, but the government of both sides of this chamber loves to bend the knee to unelected globalist bodies. Just so happens at this time I agree with them and they speak in my language. Now, to play your role in tempering inflation, to play your role, what wasteful projects will your government potentially cancel or maybe delay to help with inflation? Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, Senator Babet. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank Senator Babet for his question and his opportunity to answer it in a fulsome way. And of course, I start by going back in time a little bit to indicate just the sort of mess that the coalition left us in. And after 10 years of announcement upon announcement upon announcement, but then no delivery, of course, we are now delivering on an infrastructure program that is fit for purpose, and I stress the word fit for purpose, fiscally responsible, but above all, Senator Babet, deliverable. Now, as you say, we commissioned an independent review to ensure our infrastructure program is deliverable and does not place added pressure on inflation and the cost of living, two issues I know that you're concerned about. This review was necessary because the former government was all about announcement and no delivery. Projects were left without adequate funding or resources, and projects without real benefits to the public were approved. And it's no doubt that the National Party was mixed up in all of those sort of decisions. Now, Minister King has said that the reviewers found more than $33 billion in cost overruns across the infrastructure investment program, with a high likelihood of future, as yet unknown cost increases. Now, Minister King is working closely with the states and territories to determine the outcome of the review. The former government announced projects without checking if they were priorities of the state first. No surprises in that. And this resulted in those projects being stalled for years.
Thank you,
or
Minister.
worse,
the time for answering has expired. Senator Babet, first supplementary.
Thank you, Minister. So we're talking now about wasteful projects, talking about the previous government, fair enough. Let's speak about that for a second. Let's speak about Snowy 2.0. Snowy 2.0 is a wasteful project. We all know that. It was the Liberals' idea. It wasn't even your idea. It went from $2 billion to $5.9 billion. Now we're looking at $12 billion. The boring machine, the one that digs all the tunnels and things like that, it's been bogged for about a year, I think. It got stuck. What are you going to do to fill that hole? Are you going to cut your losses and give up? How about nuclear instead? How about that? Let's give up on Snowy 2.0. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you, Senator Babet. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and again, thanks Senator Babet for his question. No, we're not going to give up. We're not going to give up, Senator Babet. This is not a government that gives up. Look, I understand what you're saying about the cost overruns, about Snowy 2.0. But the reality is, if we're going to move to that renewable future, to the status, as I've described in a previous answer today, a renewable superpower, we do need Snowy 2.0 to work. And despite the under-resourcing by the former government, despite all the promises, we will be the government that delivers on that. And it's important. Just from this point of view, I'm sorry to keep harping on South Australia, but I happen to know a lot about it.
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Babet, second supplementary.
Thank you, Minister, for attempting to answer the question. Now, projects like Snowy 2.0, you know what they do? They take skilled tradespeople away from the residential construction sector at a time when we're facing housing shortage. Now, do you agree that wasteful projects like Snowy 2.0, these infrastructure projects, are contributing to our skilled labour shortage? And if they are, should we at least pause them for a little while, at least temporarily, to help people struggling with housing. Might that not be a good idea? A better idea is to go for nuclear instead, but anyway.
Thank you, Senator Babet. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President. Thank you, Senator Babet. You're very focused on nuclear there, I notice. Just finishing what I was going to say in my previous question, though, Senator Babet, we have surplus solar energy in South Australia during the day. That can be used to pump water up to the top of the Snowy and to produce energy at night when we don't have solar. But under the Liberals and the Nationals, the number of infrastructure projects in the pipeline blew out from 150 to almost 800, and the projects were left without adequate funding, resources or, more importantly, genuine commitment. It would be irresponsible to move ahead without fixing the backlog and cleaning up the mess that the former government left behind. And that's why Minister King has commissioned an independent review of the infrastructure investment project. This review has allowed the federal and the state—
Thank you, Minister. The time for answering has expired. Senator Lambie.
Thank you. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Defence.
Senator Lambie, could you resume your seat? Order across the chamber. I expect Senator Lambie to be able to ask her question in silence. Senator Lambie will reset the clock and please start again.
My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Defence. Last month, I asked a question on the ADF pay increase being at a rate that is actually a pay cut. In response to my question on Australian Defence Force pay, Minister Wong said, and I quote, "The pay increase that is recommended, on the advice I have, is above the RBA's estimates for inflation over the next 3 years," end quote. Minister, since that time, we have all heard from the new Reserve Bank Governor Michelle Bullock, the International Monetary Fund and lots of economists that the economy is not cooling as quickly as the RBA initially forecast. Minister, why is your government sticking to its guns on a pay cut for our diggers?
Thank you, Senator Lambie. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President, and thank you, Senator Lambie. I don't think anyone in this chamber disputes your commitment to our troops, and obviously you're a former service personnel yourself, and I know that you've got a very deep commitment here. Of course, the government, in managing its budget, we have to make responsible offers when we're undertaking enterprise bargaining or any other form of negotiation with people who are paid by the Commonwealth Government. There's a wide range of sectors within the public service that are currently in enterprise bargaining negotiations. We always try to put forward what we consider to be a fair offer as a government that does believe in wages being lifted, but we obviously also have to operate within a budget and try to make sure that those are responsible offers that we put forward. I know, Senator Lambie, that in addition to the basic pay rates that you're talking about, I know you've got an interest in issues around recruitment and retention of defence personnel, and you'd be aware that our government has announced a retention bonus for ADF personnel, which would see them receive a $50,000 retention bonus towards the end of their initial period of service if they remain in the ADF for a further 3 years. That's going to be an initial 2-year pilot before being extended based on its results. So I recognise that that's not exactly what you're talking about in terms of the basic pay rates to our troops, but we are trying to find ways of delivering fair remuneration for troops in recognition of the service that they provide and the danger that they put themselves in each and every day. So this is something that we'll keep working on, but as I say, we do need to undertake all of these pay rises within an overall responsible budget strategy.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Lambie, first supplementary.
Defence public servants have been offered the same pay increase as a uniformed ADF, 11.2% over 3 years. The public service, which has a very active union, see this for what it is, a pay cut, and are taking industrial action to address it. Our diggers, on the other hand, have to smile and take what the CDF gives them while their unique service to our country goes unrecognised. Minister, why is it that the Public Service Union has a seat at the negotiating table while diggers have to take what the CDF gives them?
Thank you, Senator Lambie. Minister Watt.
Thank you, Senator Lambie. Well, I mean, I think in one respect you've put forward exactly why unions play such an important role in the workplace by being able to bring employees together to negotiate on behalf of everyone to seek a better deal. Of course, you would be aware, as a former servicewoman, that there aren't unions covering service people, and that means that they don't benefit, I guess, from the union arrangements that are in place for other members who work for the Defence Department. But one thing I would like to mention, though, is that beyond the basic pay rates and pay rises that are awarded or provided to ADF personnel, of course, ADF members' remuneration has also increased through additional factors such as allowances. So salary and allowance increases have been delivered through a combination of an increase through a new salary-related allowance framework and a new workplace remuneration arrangement, and I'm happy to provide you with some more details of that if that would be of interest.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Lambie, second supplementary.
Just a few moments ago, the Reserve Bank of Australia lifted interest rates again. They lifted them by 25 points. They did this because they got their early inflation forecast wrong again. Minister, do you finally accept that your government sold diggers a dud and that you are the Christmas Grinch handing out pay cuts for Christmas?
Thank you, Senator Lambie. Minister Watt.
Thank you, President. And Senator Lambie, no, I wouldn't accept that position. And in fact, this government has done more than most when it comes to providing cost of living relief for all Australians, whether they be service personnel or any other person working in the community. You're aware of some of the things that we've done that benefit service personnel just as much as they do any other worker, whether it be cheaper medicines, cheaper childcare. In some cases, people would be eligible for energy rebates and a range of other measures as well. I am aware that the Independent Reserve Bank Board has today raised interest rates by 25 basis points, and we know that that decision will hit Australians hard. And what we're doing about it is providing as much cost of living relief as we possibly can while recording a budget surplus, something that the coalition government was unable to do for the entire 10 years that they were in government, to take pressure off inflation and pressure off interest rates. We understand that this will be hitting a lot of Australians hard, and we will keep working hard to provide as much cost of living relief as we can, and for a change it would be nice to have the opposition's support.
The time has expired. Senator Marielle Smith.
Thanks, President. My question is to the Minister representing the Minister for Health, Senator Farrell. Minister, last week the Albanese government tripled the incentive that general practitioners receive to bulk bill children under 16, pensioners and other Commonwealth concession card holders. How many Australians will benefit from the increase to the bulk billing incentive, and how will this make it easier for Australians to see a doctor?
Thank you, Senator Smith. Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thanks, Senator Smith, for her question and the great work that she does as a Senator for South Australia. Bulk billing is the beating heart of Medicare, and Labor will always strengthen it. The May budget provided an historic $6.1 billion investment in Medicare to lay the foundations for significant reform to general practice and primary care for all Australians. We've boosted indexation of Medicare payments with boosts in July and November, delivering the largest increase to Medicare payments since Paul Keating was Prime Minister. In fact, the Albanese government has delivered a larger increase in 1 year than the former government delivered over 7 years. From the 1st of November, the incentive that general practitioners receive to bulk bill children under 16, pensioners and other Commonwealth concession card holders will be tripled for most common GP consults. It will be easier to find. Yeah, no, you let them down too. You let them down too. Yeah, you didn't deliver enough of them, Senator McKenzie. It will be another failure of your government. It will be easier to fund a bulk billing doctor for around 5 million children and their families and 7 million pensioners and other concession card holders. Together, these patients account
Senator
for 3.3 out of 5 visits to GPs. These changes mean that we are making it easier to see a bulk billing doctor for more than 11 million Australians. Yes, I do believe it. Yeah, no, I do believe it. I do believe it because when we say we're going to do something, unlike your government, Senator Ruston,
thank you, Minister.
we
The
do
time
it.
for answering has expired. Order. Senator Smith, first supplementary.
Thank you. Can the minister outline to the Senate how investing in a stronger Medicare delivers better primary healthcare services for all Australians, as well as any other actions that the government is taking to improve access to high-quality, affordable healthcare, including in our beautiful state of South Australia?
Thank you. Senator Smith, Minister.
Thank you, President. And I agree with you, Senator Smith. It is a beautiful state. Strengthening Medicare provides us with a foundation to rebuild primary health care after a decade of neglect and cuts. This won't happen overnight, but we have begun the task of delivering the improvements that are so badly needed. We've introduced a new Medicare rebate for GP consultations of 60 minutes or longer, giving patients a rebate of $191.20 and doctors the time to provide better care for people with complex conditions. We are making vital medicines cheaper to millions of Australians, and South Australians are saving $12 million since the 1st of January this year. And we have opened 36 Medicare urgent care clinics around the country, including 5 across South Australia, with Marion and Elizabeth clinics now up and running.
Senator Smith, second supplementary.
Minister, how have these changes introduced by the Albanese government been greeted by health consumers and peak organisations representing Australian doctors and general practitioners demonstrate the government's commitment to strengthening Medicare?
Thank you, Senator Smith. Minister.
Thank you, President, and thanks Senator Smith for her second supplementary question. We're absolutely determined to strengthen Medicare. The Coalition only ever supports Medicare through gritted teeth. We remember John Howard describing bulk billing as a complete rort. Peter Dutton tried to strangle it, firstly by attempting to introduce a GP tax and then by freezing Medicare rebates for 6 long years. This government is committed to a strong Medicare. Our actions to strengthen Medicare have been described as a game-changer by the Royal Australian College of General Practitioners. The President of the College, Dr Nicole Higgins, says this funding puts patients first. It will help stem the bleeding, relieve pressure on our entire healthcare system, including our hospitals, and ease pressure on people struggling to afford the care that they need.
Thank you, Minister, and I remind you to refer to others in the other place by their correct titles. Senator Hume.
Thank you, Madam President. My question is to the Minister representing the Treasurer, Senator Farrell. Minister, how much more per month will a family with a $750,000 mortgage have to pay as a result of today's interest rate increase?
Minister Farrell.
Thank you, President, and thank Senator Hume. Well, of course, the Independent Reserve Bank Board has today raised interest rates, regrettably, by 0.25 basis points, taking the official 25 basis points, taking the official cash rate to 4.35%. And, of course, we understand that today's decision will hit Australians hard.
Order.
The price pressures that we face are coming at us from around the world, but they're hitting the hip pockets of ordinary Australians the hardest. That's why our highest priority is rolling out the $23 billion cost of living relief.
Minister Farrell, please resume your seat. Senator Hume.
On relevance, Madam President, the question was quite specific. For a family with a $750,000 mortgage, how much more per month do they need to pay after today's rate rise?
I will draw the minister to your question. Thank you, Senator Hume. And I will remind senators across the chamber the minister has the right to be heard in sight. Senator Pratt, I've just called the Senate to order. Minister.
Thank you, President. I don't have the specific figures on that amount of money, but I can tell you, Senator Hume, that following the RBA's decision, the monthly repayment on the average existing $360,000 loan balance would increase by $57 a month to $259 $2,569.
Senator Hume, first supplementary.
Thank you, Madam President. How much more, Senator Farrell, will a family with a $750,000 mortgage be paying each year on their mortgage payments compared to when you came to office?
Thank you, Senator Hume. Minister Farrell.
Well, I think I said in my previous answer, Senator Hume, that I didn't have the figure on that. But well, then why are you asking me the question if you already know the answer? Why are you asking? Why are you wasting our time? But I can go to the figure. I can go to the figure for $360,000 loan.
Minister Farrell, please resume your seat. Order. Minister, please continue.
I can go to the figure of $360,000 loan. That would increase the figure to $2,560.
Minister Farrell, please resume your seat. I will come to you, Senator Birmingham, but I am going to ask for order. Senator Hughes, I just called the Senate to order, and the minute almost that the minister got back on his feet, you were interjecting very loudly. That is very disrespectful. Senator Birmingham.
President, point of order. The minister was asked very clearly about the increase Australians are facing throughout the life of the Albanese Labor government. Defies belief that he doesn't have something in his briefing that indicates how much more people are paying under the Albanese Labor government. Isn't it $24,000 a year?
Please resume your seat. That is not a point of order. It's a debating point. Order. Order. Thank you. Order. I invite all of those senators who wish to debate this to make themselves available at the many opportunities during the rest of the week, not during question time. Minister, please continue.
Well, can I say to Senator Birmingham, it's not helping those people who've got this extra cost it's not.
Senator Cash, Senator Birmingham, order.
I've reported the figures that I have available. It's very clear that the 2.5% has gone up, and those figures can easily be calculated.
Thank you, Minister. Senator Birmingham, order. Senator McGrath, order. Senator Hume, second supplementary.
Thank you, President. To save Minister Watt from using his fingers, the answer is somewhere between $22,000 and $24,000 a year more. Will you, Senator Farrell, agree or disagree that it is your government's responsibility to bring inflation down?
Thank you, Senator Hume. Minister Watt.
I agree, and that's exactly what we are doing. And on that note, I will ask that more future questions be put on the notice paper.